Hey guys, in this month's top 5, I'm going to be sharing with you books that are about coming-of-age stories. So let's start with perhaps one of the most obvious books when it comes to a coming-of-age story. At number 5, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Great Expectations is a novel about a little boy named Pip who, just through some circumstances, this older woman meets up with him, and she essentially wants to be his benefactor and turn him into a gentleman. So yeah, this little boy Pip, he definitely comes from like a poor background. He doesn't really have any education. He definitely has no money. So yeah, the fact that this older, wealthy, eccentric woman is going to be his benefactor and going to turn him into a gentleman, it's a big deal. And it's such a wonderful story, Great Expectations. I've read it numerous times. I've seen several different adaptations of it over the years. It's definitely a classic coming-of-age story because Pip over the course of the story, he learns a lot about himself. He has so much growth and development, and sometimes he like regresses. You know, there's moments where he kind of regresses and he realizes that he's made some mistakes. He's maybe been a little shitty to people. And yeah, just all of the various different people and characters that he meets, the situations he gets into, all of this reflects on his growth and how he becomes the man that he becomes and whatnot. It's definitely your most classic, typical case of a coming-of-age story, since you are seeing him as a little boy to a young man and whatnot. At number 4, His Dark Materials by Philippa Pullman. And the character that we focus on in this book, her name is Lyra. The big thing about His Dark Materials series, it takes place in pretty much an alternate universe that is very similar to our world, but does have some differences. And another big thing about this entire trilogy, you guys, it definitely has to do with universe hopping, multi-dimensions, and whatnot. And it can be a little confusing at times, but I think Philip Pullman really pulls it off wonderfully well, that it's never, like, really confusing. Yeah, you just gotta get it straight in your head. There are multiple universes, multiple realities and whatnot. So yeah, the main character of Lyra, she's a little girl. She's really spunky and precocious. She doesn't act like a stereotypical little girl. She'd much rather be kind of more like the boys, you know. She's pretty much your classic case of like a tomboy. She wants to have fun and adventures, and if she don't need to shower, she don't need to shower. And it's her story of definitely being this little girl and maturing into adolescence by the very end of this trilogy. Because something else that's important to note about this trilogy, since it takes place in this whole other universe, in this world, when you're born, what's also born with you and attached with you is like an animal companion called demons. And when you're a child, the demon will shapeshift into all sorts of animals. It could be a raccoon, it could be a cat, it could be a dog, you know, it could be anything. But when you reach puberty, pretty much, your demon will stabilize and it will become one specific animal. So this entire trilogy, the whole thing is all about adolescence and your childhood into your adulthood, pretty much. It's a big, huge, major theme. You know, what does it mean to be a child? What does it mean to be an adult? You know, are there these particles? You know, that's the kind of a thing too. There's like these particles called dust that are really vague and mysterious, and do these hold some sort of sway, you know, between childhood and adulthood? It's all sorts of bizarre and crazy, you guys. If you read the book, it all makes more sense. And yeah, Lyra, like I said, she starts off as very spunky and wild and crazy little girl, and it is her story of maturing, and though she doesn't want to mature and grow, it's like she has to face that. She has to face growing and maturing and face adulthood head on and whatnot. It's such a remarkable trilogy. Lyra is such a wonderful, well fleshed out character that you can sympathize for and root for. She has such an incredible growth and development over the course of this series, which I can't entirely sit and talk about too much because since it is a trilogy, I'll end up spoiling too much. But it is her development is truly amazing for a children's book. At number 3, The Giver by Lois Lowry. And this book takes place in another world. I always kind of got the idea this book took place like after some sort of post-apocalyptic event. And this book is another kind of bizarre book. And it's kind of one of those books that a lot of people tend to read when they're in elementary school, because that's when I first read The Giver, was in elementary school. And what's going on in this book, what you kind of don't even realize until kind of a certain point in this book, this world is very black and white. Literally. This world, the people see no color. It's all black and white. Everything is perfect. Everything is pristine. If there is anything wrong, deformed, not right, it's taken out of the equation. Everything is perfect. So this little boy, his name is Jonas, all of a sudden one day he can kind of see flashes of color, and this proves to be a kind of an oddity, but something that is needed at the moment, because in this community there is an elderly gentleman who is known as the Giver, and the Giver holds the memories of this world. He knows everything, he remembers everything, and he has the ability to share and pass on those memories. So Jonas, because he has the ability to see color, which is an oddity, it is deemed that he is going to be the next Giver, because the current Giver is very old and elderly. He will die at some point, so there needs to be a new Giver. That new Giver is going to be Jonas, and Jonas is rather reluctant about it. He kind of doesn't really want that responsibility. It's like he's willing to kind of take it on if he must, but he kind of really doesn't, you know. He's still a little boy. So yeah, what makes this a great coming-of-age narrative, because yeah, Jonas, he is a little boy, and he does have to take on this weight and responsibility of taking memories. Because like I said, this world, you kind of get the sense that it takes place in this post-apocalyptic world, and now this world, everything has to be pristine and perfect. Nobody remembers the past. All pain is stripped away, all misery. There's no starvation. There's no poverty. Everybody has great health care and everything. Like, everything is like so utopian, but that's not realistic, you know? So what Jonas is given by the Giver, Jonas is given kind of the reality of the world, you know, when there was starvation and homelessness and poverty, war, pain, struggle. Jonas is given all of that, and it's such a weight and burden that the Giver has to share. And it's a wonderful coming of age story of Jonas definitely kind of being forced to leave childhood and go into adulthood and face this. And yeah, you get an amazing climax to this book, you guys. It's like, oh my god, wow. And I this book, like I said, I first read it in elementary school, and it has just stuck with me forever. You know, it's so hard to just not forget about this book. I need a reread of it. I've not had a reread of it in a long time, but it's a truly great work of classic children's literature if you have not read it already. At number 2, City of Thieves by David Benioff. This book is set during the siege of Leningrad in Russia during World War II. It follows a young teenage boy named Lev, who he's thrown into prison for a little bit after he's caught stealing something. And in the same cell as him is a deserter from the military named Kolya, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who is a kind of a much more older man, like maybe in his 20s, I kind of gathered. And the two of them, they're in the same prison cell together. And what kind of brings them together ultimately is that this Soviet colonel approaches them And like I said, it's important that this book takes place during the siege of Leningrad, because during this time period, especially with Leningrad, because it's not the Nazi invasion and whatnot, there is massive struggle going on and massive starvation, and you can't get food pretty much. So this Soviet colonel approaches Lev and Kolya, and his daughter is about to have a wedding, of all things, during the siege of Leningrad. Oh my god. And the thing is, to make her wedding cake, they need like a dozen eggs to make the cake. So Lev and Kolya, they're given the mission, hey, you want to stay in prison, maybe die, get executed at some point? Hey, you can go get these eggs instead, and we'll sway your sentence away or whatever, you know. So I love this book. This book, there's something kind of bizarre about it, you know. These two guys during the siege of Leningrad who have to go and get eggs for a freaking wedding cake of all things. I love the whimsy of kind of the narrative there. It's so great because this is a really serious time period and whatnot, and it really adds this nice comedic levity to the story. And what makes this a wonderful coming of age story, like I said, because your main point of view is the teenage boy Lev, and he's a teenager. He's about to hit kind of adulthood, essentially, kind of reaching that point of becoming a man. And this book is kind of really about, you know, what does it mean to be a man, and his greatest influence that he has right now is Kolya, this deserter from the army or whatever. And Kolya is really brash and daring and handsome. He's a ladies' man, and he's kind of all these things that Lev is not. And it's about Lev really gaining like this sense of self-confidence, kind of coming out of his shell, and he has Kolya here as kind of this mentor figure, maybe even like a brother-father figure in a weird sort of way, and he really grows and learns from this guy, and yeah, that's such the big joy of this novel, I think, is definitely their relationship with one another, their back and forth banter. They have moments where they're arguing, moments where they're sharing in deep things, and it makes it a really wonderful coming of age story with Lev, who he is at the beginning versus who he is by the end, and what he takes out of this adventure. You know, that's kind of the big thing, what he takes out of this adventure, getting these 12 eggs, because there's a lot of shit that happens to these two guys on this journey to get 12 eggs. And there's something about this book, weirdly enough, if you've seen the movie 1917, I would really recommend this book if you liked something like 1917. There's something kind of really oddly reminiscent of that. But yeah, I definitely love this book. I love it to bits. I've been wanting to reread it for the longest time, you guys. And at number 1, Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. Oh my god, you guys. This is another book that I read back in elementary school. Kind of one of those things that I think a lot of elementary school teachers tend to have their students read. At least when the school I went to, everyone read this book. I freaking love Tuck Everlasting, you guys. It's definitely one of those books that has stuck with me. I even liked the movie that came out years ago. What Tuck Everlasting is about, I'm trying to remember the details here since I've not read it in such a long time. It takes place, like, I think right at the very end of the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken, kind of almost right there around the turn of the century, if you will. It takes place kind of somewhere in that frame of time. And it follows a little girl named Winnie. And I don't think she's quite yet reached being a teenager. She's kind of on the verge of being a teenager, you know. It follows a young girl named Winnie. She's upper class, she's privileged, but even with that, there's still this feeling that she has of being like trapped in her house, being trapped behind the white picket fence, if you will. And she wants to get out there. She wants to go beyond the fence that surrounds her grand house. She wants to go beyond this fence and adventure and learn things. So she travels outside the fence one day, and this is where she meets the Tucks. And the Tucks have a big secret. They are immortal. They cannot die. And when I first read this book, that was absolutely mind-blowing to me, you guys. I was like, oh my god, they can't die. They can live forever. And at the core of this story, this story really deals with some big, heavy issues, and I just can't believe this is a children's book, because I feel like as a child I didn't appreciate this book as much. Like, I still enjoyed it and loved it, but when I had like a reread of it as an adult, like, I found like a really greater newfound appreciation for it, and understanding more than anything, because at the heart of this story, it's a novel about life and death, pretty much. What does it mean to live, ultimately, at the end of the day? What is the purpose of living? And yeah, the fact that this family can't die, you know? And Winnie gets this integral moment in the novel, because the way the Tucks got their immortality, it was from this mystical spring of water. They took a sip of it, and they started realizing, hey, we're not aging. If we have accidents, we're not dying from our accidents. If we get sick, we're not dying from our sickness. They started realizing, oh, this magical well water or whatever, it's given us our immortality. So at some point in this novel, there is this pivotal moment where Winnie gets the choice: will she drink from the water as well, or not? And like I said, this novel has a lot to do with life and death. If you were given the opportunity for immortality, would you take it? You know? Because once again, the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to live, essentially, do things with your life, to grow, to experience, to make mistakes, to love, to have family, you know? So yeah, this book is really tackling a lot of stuff, and that what it means to live, the purpose of life, the purpose even of death, you know, and it can be fairly emotional, maybe even depressing at times when you start thinking about these things. Especially if you read this as an adult, it can be kind of sad, I think. But also, I think there's something still even just really emotionally effective by the end of this book, I feel like. So yeah, Winnie, like I said, because she's a little girl at the start of this, and it is her journey of having to make this choice. Will she accept immortality? But because if she does she want to sit and be a little girl for the rest of her life? You know, she has her whole life ahead of her. She can become a teenager, she can become a young woman, she can become a middle-aged woman, an elderly woman, you know? Is she denying herself all that? So it is. I love her story in this, and the themes and messages of this particular narrative. It's just an outstanding work of children's literature, very much like The Giver, I think. So you guys, that is it for my top 5 books that deal with coming-of-age stories. In the comments below, have I left any important books out, books that maybe you like or prefer? Just let me know down below, and what makes them a coming-of-age story to you. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.